Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Fur Buddy Builds. After watching today's video, I can guarantee one of two things. You're either going to teach me something new by leaving a comment, or you're going to learn something new from this video. The purpose of today's video is to teach how I use layering techniques to create a story with a single look of the model. So we're going to start by actually putting a top coat over some weathered effects that we used as an undercoat. So we're going to mix the paint up to approximately a skim milk consistency, and then we're going to create a light coat over the top of the weathered effects. I'm using an Iwata airbrush, approximately 18 pounds of pressure. The paint is very well thinned. I like to start by spraying on a piece of legal pad just to kind of get a lay down. And here what you're seeing is I'm laying a thin coat of paint over the top of the random marks that I made. And then when combined with other techniques, this creates a very natural weathered look. Now I am running this playback of this video at approximately 2 times speed, just in the interest of time. Now, all of the prep work that we have done allows for us to have very smooth coats of paint and a very natural looking model, or at least as natural as we can make this particular model. And again, we want to build in layers. So you can see me laying here very light coats of paint to allow the effects underneath to show up. And we'll likely put another coat over the top of this as it dries. And again, just the key here is thin layers and working our way into the final product. And there you can see the results, and you can just lightly see the randomness underneath the paint, which is a pretty good effect. I studied a lot of reference images, even watched things like Pearl Harbor, the movie, to get an idea of what the effect should look like. And so now we're ready to actually glue the two fuselage halves together. And the main reason that I did not do this earlier in the build is this particular model has a lot of turrets, and I wanted to minimize the amount of masking that I needed to do. If I were to build this kit again, I actually would have fully assembled the model and mask it later. So the purpose here of the blue painter's tape is I use that as a easy method to hold the model together until I can apply clamps. And I've pre-sanded the model, which you can find in a previous video, to make sure that everything fits well and that my surfaces are smooth like an aircraft should be. And now we're going to go ahead and just lightly apply Tamiya extra thin cement where needed and apply some additional clamps on top of the blue tape so that we do not damage our finish. And while that's drying, I'm going to test fit the nose turret. And what I've found is that the fit is not quite perfect. Now I had to remake this pin because the carpet monster actually managed to catch that. So what I'm going to do now is actually bore the hole to be slightly larger to fit. And you'll notice the bit in this tool is at an angle because the pin that I made is not actually perfectly straight. And we'll go ahead and insert that pin and make sure the fit looks good. And the initial fit is actually splitting the model apart, which is definitely not desirable. We want it to rotate and have good motion and fit well. And that looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and apply just a light amount of Tamiya extra thin cement to the parts and go ahead and join them together. Now I'm going to go ahead and hold the back side of this pin in with a paintbrush handle as I press the turret down, just so that I don't push the pin back out of the hole. Hold that for a few seconds. Just double check it, and then we'll let it dry. Now that the glue's dried, we're ready to remove the clamps, and we'll go ahead and validate that the turrets actually rotate like they're supposed to. And we'll check each one of those to make sure that they're functional. And it looks like they are, so that's a success. So we can go ahead and start removing the painter's tape. As you can see, we left the surface undamaged by having that as a buffer in between the clamps. So we'll continue removing the painter's tape. And we've got the first stage of weathering done on the model, and it is now assembled. Make sure the guns move. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now because I pre-painted, I really should have put some blue tack or something inside here to mask this off, but since I didn't, we've got to go ahead and remove the paint, use a toothbrush to clean up the area, and then we'll be able to go ahead and fit the wings. Now the wings aren't quite snapping into place, so we're going to have to do a little bit of light sanding in order to get those to fit appropriately. And I'm really big on making sure things fit correctly and taking the time. Even if I make a mistake, I'm going to come back and do it again. So here you'll see us shave off some of the wing in order to ensure the fit looks good, and then we'll come back up and we'll use that as an opportunity for additional weathering later down the road. In this case, I use actual Tamiya regular cement. I guess it's much thicker. I prefer this thicker cement in this particular case. I think it provides a slightly better bond and stays in place a little bit easier. And with that wing set, we're ready to attach the second side. It underwent the same treatment. And it looks like we're going to find that the front of that wing actually has some problems. So we'll just make a quick modification to that. And we'll go ahead and get the model, get the wings assembled against the fuselage here. What a good fit. Okay, now you will notice there is a seam on the model. That is actually mainly just paint, but I do come back and actually didn't record it, but basically I came back and lightly filled that seam with Valaejo latex filler and removed that seam and just lightly put a coat of paint over the top. So here we're going to go ahead and put the rear wing section together. Same cement. And there we have it. There's our assembled model. Now I'm going to use a airframe holder to hold the model so that I don't have to touch it as much. And this also helps ensure that I can work on the model without damaging parts, like I just knocked that wing off there. Once those are set, won't have a problem. So now we're grabbing some flat Tamiya, and I'm going to thin that with some alcohol. And we're going to go ahead and paint our props. So I'm not going to bore you with painting all the props. Just basically mixing a little bit of Tamiya flat back with the alcohol. Get that to a skim milk consistency. Load it into our airbrush. And we'll go ahead and paint these props. Again, I like to test spray on a legal pad, or I usually put photography photo paper in my paint booth. Okay, so what I'm identifying here is that the engine cowlings are actually hollow on the edges, and this particular model casting doesn't have a lot of detail. So with very little effort, I can go ahead and use this rotary tool to drill out and carve out the engine cowlings. Now I'm going to actually put this plane through quite a bit of damage. It's going to not only have been hit by flak, but also have received some gunfire from fighters. And so this is going to be very important later. So basically, I'm just drilling in to the air intake ducts for the engine, and then I will use this bit and others to go ahead and carve this out. So I'm just kind of lightly scratching the surface with that, outlining what I want to do, using a toothbrush to check my work. And yes, this looks pretty rough, but as we continue to carve, this is going to look more natural. Now, one of the things I didn't like the rough edge, it was too pronounced. So I went ahead and added a more polished edge and then worked through a variety of sanding grits to smooth that out and make it look more like the appropriate aluminum. Now, I do want to have some scratches because, again, like this plane needs to look like it's been hit by flak. And here I'm using a number 11. No, that's not right. Maybe it's a 4 scalpel blade to carve out the various parts of that intake. Okay, so one thing that I did notice is I want to go ahead and create at least some visual cue that this is supposed to be an engine. So the standard, this has 0 detail. So I'm using a combination of dark aluminum and regular aluminum. And basically I'm going to draw in the cylinder heads. This is not going to be perfect. It's just meant to create some representation. So I outlined the cylinder heads with the bright aluminum, and then I came back with the dark aluminum to create what would be the recessed fins of the engine. And in the end, I think this looks pretty good when combined with the propeller. So again, this isn't meant to be perfect. I looked at doing this with wire, it's just going to take too much time. Okay, here we are. So I've applied chipping fluid and a dark olive drab over the top and some additional weathering effects. And basically to create a very weathered, very weathered bomber. Again, the title of this piece ends up being The Last Flight because it gets shot down. The pilots, we're going to assume, bailed out safely. This is not based off of any historical event. It's actually just an artistic representation of what life might have been like in the particular dogfights. So, or battle, I should say. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply some chipping fluid to the fuselage around the areas where I touched up after using the filler, and then I airbrushed some over the top of the filler once I filled the seam of the fuselage. So we're going to generously apply a couple coats of the chipping fluid, allow that to fully dry, and then I'm going to come back with the dark olive drab. It's actually kind of a brown olive drab, and we're going to brush paint that over the top of the nose where I had to do quite a bit of filling work. And we'll thin that out pretty well, put a little flow in it, and we will go ahead and brush that on and allow it to dry. So, oh yes, I also painted the engine cowlings so that I could also have some additional chips. So, and you can see that I've weathered the engines quite a bit. So you can see the one that's laying there on the paper has received quite a bit of chipping and aluminum scuffs, which you'll see in the final pictures. Just in the interest, my videos started to get pretty long. I'm trying to improve my video quality, so I'm actually doing a voiceover instead of recording my audio. And a lot of these steps I'm playing back at least 2 times speed, just because maybe I work a little slower than others. And I want to try to keep these videos engaging while also teaching. So please do leave us a like or a comment. I hope that I can create engaging content and provide some training. And also, I'm very open to learn. So if you have suggestions about better ways to do things, I've just returned back this year to this hobby. I'm learning a lot myself. I've watched a lot of videos. There's a lot of really good content out there. And really, from my perspective, I'm trying to show what I've learned and also show some kind of old school techniques, I guess. And while I'm showing this piece here, the weathering that you see on the wings and other parts, I've actually used AK pencils for that, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Now, one of the things is with chipping fluid, either I didn't get enough or just my brush wasn't stiff enough. So I came back with a flat toothpick to increase the weathering look on the nose here. And so using that to scuff off some of the paint and create a more natural look. And again, watching Pearl Harbor and others, I've used slow-mo and pause and a bunch of other things, and these bombers were pretty rough looking as they got some age on them, and they had a lot of streaks, at least from what I could tell. It may not be perfect, but again, this is an artistic representation of what that might look like. So what I'm doing here is just adding some white pen wash over the surface to create a very oxidized look to the paint. And as it dries, here you can see essentially it's representing dirty rainwater that may have gathered on the plane. And I tried to apply it in the direction of the airflow and as it would pool. And now I'm going to go ahead and come back now that all of the chipping process is dried, and I'm going to use a very sharp AK pencil to line the body panel lines. And then we'll use a wet brush to sort of smooth that effect out. So now that I've got that applied, I'm going to use dark aluminum to highlight any rivets. And you can see the effect of that on the wing there. You can see how some of the rivets are highlighted. And that's because I used this technique that I am showing here, which is basically just to use the edge of the pencil to lightly trace the rivets to give them a slight pop. And then as we put layers of varnish between the chipping effects and whatnot, this plane is meant to look like it has really had a rough life. And I can appreciate this might be too much weathering for some, but I really do want to show that this plane has had quite a bit. So here I've wet the surface and I'm using the dark aluminum to create flak scuffs in the paint where a flak explosion, maybe a piece of metal, walked itself along the edge of the fuselage and left a significant damage to the paint surface as part of its last flight. Apologize for the camera readjustment. Here I'm kind of showing the damage and the weathering that I performed on that propeller. So that particular engine took a direct hit, and therefore it took quite a bit of damage. And then the same is actually true for this other side, or for its partner on that side of the wing. So again, it's weathered quite a bit more than the other side. Now here I've taped off the turrets, and I will be applying a light coat of varnish. So I'm using an extra matte varnish on the planes. So we'll be applying that shortly. Or excuse me, gloss varnish, I meant to say. And I'm doing the gloss varnish because I'm going to use an oil paint weathering technique to kind of finalize some wear. In addition to that, I'm going to apply some streaking grime to the engine nacelle that was actually hit with the significant flak and also received some gunfire damage, which we will show later. So here, after I used the gloss varnish to make it to where the streaking grime won't stick as heavily. The surfaces would be somewhat smooth on the plane, as it, in theory, would then allow that the grime and the carbon and whatnot from that explosion to come off. And I'm painting this across the fuselage here because as I reference images, I did see that a lot of planes did have a fair bit of streaking in this particular area along the fuselage. And again, on just the one side here where that took damage, we applied quite a bit of streaking grime. So now I'm using a dry weathering set, and I'm going to apply a fair bit of soot because this engine will be essentially blown, and I'm going to catch a with the weathering techniques that I have, you'll see when I apply the gunfire battle damage, we're going to show what the engine looks like when it first catches fire, and we're going to create some smoke effects in the next video. So stay tuned for that next video. And again, please comment and like if you like what you see here, and if you have any feedback, I'm definitely open to any feedback. So that's a coat of extra matte varnish, and you'll see that it toned the effect down quite a bit. And we will continue to apply additional layers. So here what we're going to do is I'm marking out just again from an artistic perspective of a gun round from a plane that would have gone through and through on the aluminum, and then we'll come back and drill these holes. So I want to map this out on the model before I actually apply the gun. So this would have been a low angle pass on the plane where the rounds would have gone through and through. And then the engine nacelle was hit pretty hard here. So I used the bit to grind this out. And I'll actually come back with another rotary tool to further dig that out. So a very shallow angle hit to that. And then we'll actually have one that's on the back side of the wing too. So this is actually just boring out and making this, melting the plastic a little bit and mimicking the way the round would have misshapen the aluminum, at least again to the best of my ability. I'm cleaning up some of the edge because I've got a little bit too much melted plastic. So again, using a scalpel blade to carefully cut that away. And then I use Tamiya putty mixed with some cement to build up the buckles that would occur in the aluminum from the round traveling through the fuselage or through the aluminum. And now I'm going to use some metallic paint where the aluminum is misformed. From what I could tell, at least from a few reference images, it caused the paint to actually flake away. And so I'm trying to mimic that effect here with the bright aluminum. And in the next video, you'll see the bottom side of the plane and kind of how that round was blown out. And since this part of the engine caught on fire, again, I'm using some black weathering powder to create an initial effect, which I will then further later with some pieces of cotton and some other methods to color the cotton and make it look like this is actually caught on fire. And now we're ready to go ahead and put on the canopy. So I've found some testers clear cement. So found using that to put a bead around that, and I will drop the canopy in. And then I use a little bit of the same paint to apply to the gaps. But overall, that canopy looks good, and we'll come back and freehand paint that in the next video. Here, this is the stargazing scope, I believe it is, that was used for old school navigation. So looking at reference images, it looked like if you look down at this piece of glass that it actually was kind of black inside. So we're going to go ahead and paint that underside with a flat black. And then we'll use, again, the tester's clear cement to affix this in place. How exciting it must have been. So here we are. This is a shot of the final product, and you can see, I'll zoom in here, and you can see the damage to the engine that we're going to cover in the next video. So I do hope that you'll subscribe and like and comment so you could there see maybe a little closer what that damage is, and I'll show how I created that. I really appreciate you watching my video of me creating this B-24J Liberator. Thanks for watching Fur Buddy Builds. Be sure to click the link for the previous video in this series or the next link for the next video in the series.